Hey, what up, everybody? Happy, I don't know, Friday, whatever. What day is this? It's the 21st. So, yeah, sorry, not under the weather, just a little crazy today. We've been out cleaning my office all day since like 7 o'clock this morning, so it's been a little nuts. But yeah, how is everybody? Happy Friday, Jesse. What's going on, my friend?
Not too much. We have the state or the county fair tonight. There's a demolition derby, and so looking forward to that. Watching some cars smash
Derby.
together.
That's going to be awesome. Have you ever seen the one with the buses?
I have. That's
Yeah.
a good time.
And there's something that showed up on my Instagram reel where it's like cars jumping off a cliff.
Oh,
Like
I
this-
saw that.
It's like in
saw that.
Alaska, right? It was
Yeah.
somewhere,
Yeah, some kind of race where they just like who can like fly the furthest with their. It was crazy. I'm like, I want to do that, sort of, but not really. But sort of. Damien, you crashing any cars over there? Hopefully not.
Not that I know of. I mean, I'm open to it. Maybe bumper cars to start with.
Bumper cars, a little more your speed.
Yeah, maybe we'll move up to the one with the buses and the figure eights and
Buses are
Probably more familiar with crash servers than crash cars, right? Oh,
yeah, let's not go there yet. I mean, it's still early in the conversation. So we do have some of those like bang up, smash up, crash up derbies here, and I had friends that have participated. Like, what you have to do to your vehicle to make this work, like remove all the glass. You got to like do something with the fuel tank. It's pretty nuts on what you have to do to modify your car in order to, participate in one of those, crash up derby kinds of things. It's kind of nuts. But I would imagine it would be super fun to just drive around and smash into things.
yeah.
So happy Friday. Let's just take a second here and maybe Damien, maybe you could read a little bit about who we are, why we are, paraphrase, who is Team Tim and what is our goals here?
Yeah. Thanks for putting me on the spot there, Tim.
Of course. Yeah. I warned you ahead of time.
Who said I'd listen? Let's talk about the Team Tims, right? So they're two passionate individuals, both named Tim, that started this streaming company. And they seem to be really passionate about governance, cybersec, compliance, and education. So hashtag Team Tim. And if you want to watch them on the weekly live streams to talk about challenges and practical insights on cybersecurity. And then they feature prominent guests from the tech space, and they aim to foster knowledge sharing and help operationalize cyber practices while advocating a shift left mentality in the industry.
Awesome. And you did say bringing on experts, right? So we'll go to little introductions first. So Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Risk and CTO over at Vital Tech Services, an MSP. Like you said, we're here to help MSPs shift left, right? What about you, Mr. Jesse? On mute, my friend. You just keep yapping away and we'll let Tim Schnur talk over you.
Sure. So thanks, Tim. Tim Schnur, Cavello, data discovery, which is, I don't know, I think it's a little bit of a new strategy and technique, hoping to make shifting left easier. It's a very proactive shift left of boom service. So excited to, do another show today, Tim. Like you said, Team Tim, we've been doing this for a couple months now, right? And we first met in the Pitchick competition last year. So, we were supposed to be dead enemies and we ended up being something else. So
yeah. It's certainly been an interesting ride. Like I don't even remember the conversation of what it was about. I'll have to go back and look at YouTube, but there's one morning, like something came up and either you texted me or I texted you or whatever the hell it was. It was like 7 or 8 in the morning. And we're like, we should just go live. And we went live. And it was like totally unscripted. And then we just kind of bantered for what was only going to be like 5 or 10 or 15, went for almost an hour. And, people were interested. And it kind of got us down this path of like, wanting to take, not our knowledge, because, we're only one little piece of the puzzle, but bring in experts like Damien to talk about different stuff, right? And so, but before I introduce Damien, we cannot miss our favorite Uncle Jesse.
Well, we'll try it without the mute button this time. I lovingly refer to myself as the third wheel on Team Tim, but Jesse Miller, the founder of Power PSA Consulting. I help MSPs streamline and scale their security programs for increased margins and higher MRR.
Awesome for that. And yes, like we did talk about earlier, like bringing in an expert. Like, I'm not an expert in backup. I know I need to have it. Insurance tells me, it's probably a good idea as part of a compliance program to do backing up. But I'll let Damien talk a little bit about himself. So.
Sure. Before I do that, maybe if you're the third wheel there, it should be 2 Tims and a JM for the new name.
TTJM.
Any votes for that, guys? Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. My story is really simple. I was an MSP. I got all these little success emails that said backup successful. And when they didn't, I went and fixed them. And anybody thought that was enough, that maybe the backups would work? Nobody that dumb, just me. So I thought that maybe they would work. I knew I couldn't get my clients to pay for testing, that sort of thing. And I went to recover those servers, and there's more to that, but I had to look my client in the face and say, I can't recover you. So I went from an MSP that had to stare a customer in the eye and tell them the thing you trusted me with, I can't do. That's why I'm so passionate about helping MSPs not lose data, whether that means working with Servosity or whether that means stealing my process, whatever that may be. And then I'm also passionate just about helping MSPs in general. So I'm the host of MSP Mindset, where I interview interesting people that it seems like MSPs want to hear from.
Yeah. And, I'm starting to get used to this whole backdrop and lower thirds and playing with the streaming thing. So at some point I'll have your link going across the bottom of the screen, right? As I start to figure anyways. So Damien, if you want to drop your link in chat, feel free. So people have that. Obviously, where we are. Speaking of links, right? We want to be able to stream this on our own channel, right? Not Tim's and not Tim's and not in order to do that, LinkedIn is kind of forcing us to have 150 followers. I think we just hit 100. So do the follow, share stuff, please. And once we hit that 150, I'll stop begging, maybe. So anyway,
and we're not posting a lot either, Tim, right? It's basically the weekly show. So,
it's basically the weekly show.
You see right there. So Fridays at 2.
Yeah. So anyways, enough of that. Let's get into, the subject of today, right? Which was, let me just pull it up, right? So we have it. Let me make this a little smaller so people can see it. Let me go back over here and do this. Safeguarding your data, right? Your bytes and bits when it comes to this, FedRAMP and CMMC and compliance and NIST and all that. What the hell does that all mean? I know it's what it means, but let's talk about this from an MSP perspective, right? So, Damien, initial quick thoughts.
Yeah, I was talking with Tim about this backstage, and it's I regularly get calls where there's a few MSPs or MSSPs that are really on the compliance track. If you're following, or we're already working with Tim, you're probably one of those. But I kind of see the broader subsection, and I feel like most, it's just confusing. I'll speak for myself. It's NIST this and CMMC that, and if that's not enough, FedRAMP. And then I got an MSP call me the other day, they need ITAR backup. Why? I don't know. They just told me. And so it's just and it's just kind of insert compliance or regulation name, and then I need everything to do that. And so is that the right approach? What does this even mean? Where do these intersect? Like, there's so many questions that come from that. And do you even need that? And you know, it's just, I know a long time ago, you know, HIPAA had no teeth, and everybody's like, oh, I need HIPAA everything. And maybe, but then you learn there's a right way to do it. There is such a thing as a BAA. You should have one. You should have one with your backup provider. You should have one certainly between you and your client. And, you know, we went through that learning curve. I feel like personally, most people in the industry, including me, are in the just like, okay, CMMC is still in a moving target stage. And how do we overlap these? Because, you know, you got 100 clients, unless you're focused on one industry or vertical, you're going to end up with a few clients across different requirements. And, you know, then I get calls like, whatever this 4-letter thing is, I need that. CGIS, I need that. I got somebody that's, I think they're a county. Yeah, exactly. I think they're like a small, you know, sheriff's office, or they do something for the sheriff. So I need that. And I'm like, do you? Well, I don't know.
Yeah. So backup even further, like just in terms of backups, right? Like I guess I have questions. Backups are simple, right? Like you're cloning your data. So like putting it in a nice safe space, and something bad happens, like hopefully you can go get it, and that doesn't get encrypted too, which I'm sure is, you know, the bad guys are like, well, if I encrypt both, like now I really got them, right? So talk about like, even before we get into the minutia of these federal, I guess, frameworks, I guess we'll call it that, Tim, right?
Yeah.
What, like, talk about some of the issues like that people are facing on a day-to-day basis with these backups. Like, are they working as intended? You know, what does it entail, right? Like, because backups, like, there's all different places that you can have backups, right? Like, you could have them on-prem, you could have them in cloud, you could have them like even in AWS. Like, there's different levels. Like, you could have this stuff in Glacier, right? Like, never gonna touch it again, right? Like, it's like free. I think they basically make it free so that like you make it, and it's really expensive to go get it, right? So like, how do you decide on those levels of availability? I guess we could call it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what are some of the issues, you know, on a day-to-day basis? And before we like jump into the real minutia of like all the Tim Golden, you know, FedRAMP, right?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut and let y'all keep rambling.
Okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned Glacier. I don't care if it's, you know, that's AWS. I don't care if it's Azure. Even if you don't go to the super cold storage, right? It's free to upload, and it's super expensive to download. So even if we're not talking about the storage tier, and then Glacier makes it worse, it's like Hotel California. You can bring all your data, and you know, can't afford to get it out. You can't check out. So, so, you know, there's a real challenge that's sometimes missed in those kind of hyperscale cloud providers. Yeah, I mean, to make it simple, right? If you have an on-prem server, you're in this day and age with any modern tooling, doing local and cloud backups. That's kind of the normal standard fare. You know, nowadays, I think everything is generally encrypted in flight and at rest. There's some stuff that's pretty standard. The two things I see that are coming down the pipe because people are forced to deal with them is, one is immutable storage or mutability.
I'm going to pause you there. You want to explain that for us ignorant people in the audience, for us in the back.
Yeah. It's hard to say. That's the hard word, immutable storage or immutability. But basically, it's, think of it in the old days of if you ever heard of a worm drive, write once, read many. Basically, anybody old enough to appreciate that. And so it's that for the cloud. It's just more convenient because you're not asking somebody to take a tape off site or some other drive. And so you mentioned cyber attacks and adversaries. Obviously, if they can encrypt both the backups and your primary storage, then you're much more likely to pay the ransom. You know, you can look every single day and you see a new pre-built kit for sale that basically is a search and destroy, where it understands specific backup vendors and knows how to disrupt them And so it's just a matter of time until your backup vendor has a pre-built kit that I can buy on the dark web for $15.
Right.
And so, you know, if my point is you can't say, oh, well, this is the best name or the best vendor. So actually they're more likely to be a target because of that. And going back to the storage, immutable storage really means nobody can delete it. Nobody can encrypt it, you know, or overwrite it or tamper with it, just like in the worm drive days. And the reason that's important is because whether it's a ransomware script or a much more targeted attack, and I think you guys probably all know, it's not just the client getting attacked, right? It could be us as an MSP or, unfortunately, the vendor, right? It doesn't have to be you.
So all right, I'm going to date myself. So it's like back in the day when I would make a mixtape for my girlfriend, and I would put the little piece of tape on the back of the cassette so you couldn't record over it anymore. I basically locked that thing down so that this was just me and my girls 8-track, right? And we could like cruise the beat with our music, and I didn't have to worry about my mom, you know, overwriting it with Lawrence Welk or something, right? That's the whole idea of this immutable. I can't even say it. Immutable backup, right? Is write it once, can't deal with it. Like with, you know, in our product, we talk a little bit about word, write once, deploy many. Right. So yeah, I kind of get the concept, right? But I have to go back to my roots. Like, I don't want my mom overwriting my Bryan Adams with her Lawrence Welk, period. Right.
That's how we should just describe it right there. That's the TLDR. I love that.
There's a creepy
so
another little Black Mirror episode, and that tape is not immutable. I'll just leave it at that. I hope that's not a spoiler for the season, but if you catch it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
So another little interesting tidbit, like I mentioned earlier, you know, we're moving offices, we're cleaning stuff out, we're throwing crap away. Like, I just came across a box, like literally boxes and boxes of backup tapes that, you know, we've, you know, as years go by and then the machines get better, they get faster, the disks get bigger. But then I have all those old backup tapes, ones that are like literally the size of a camcorder, all the way up to the giant, you know, multi-terabyte, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, great. Now I have to actually either go through all of these things to determine what's data on there, or I have to like burn them or something. Like, what am I going to do with hundreds of old tapes that we've kept? Because, you know, data destruction, yes, we do have a data destruction policy, but some of the contract work has required us to keep that for 7 years. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, like, okay, we're outside the window, and now I have all this data. Like, what do I do with the stuff? I don't even have a drive that can read it.
Right. You have it, but it doesn't mean you can access it.
True. So, not to mention the floppy disk version of Backup Exec 6 that I came across, and I was like, oh, I gotta grab that picture to put it on the live stream today.
Is that like?
It wasn't even Symantec; it was Veritas Backup Exec on floppy.
Is that like Windows for Workgroups edition? You know?
Oh yeah. It was a pretty like. All right, well, digressing here a little bit, but yeah, there was some very interesting finds in this, you know, 30-year building we've been in, like DOS 1 point something, brand new in the box, shrink wrapped. I'm like, I am eBaying that sucker because I'll probably get a couple $100. I think somebody wants a brand new shrink wrapped DOS. I know they do. Anyways, enough about my. Yeah,
it's probably like the iPhone, right? Somebody just bought the first iPhone, right? And where they pay like $2 million.
Yeah,
maybe you can get the shrink wrap version of DOS 1 for
maybe.
The cool price.
All right, enough about my anecdotes today. Let's get back up to the backup. Let's back up. Let's get backed up.
I have a question. You know, just to clarify, what makes is something that's interesting to me to consider. What makes a compliant backup versus a non-compliant backup? So
I mean, I know there's probably different metrics for it, but let's talk CMMC, because that seems to be a question that I hear a lot. What makes a CMMC compliant backup? Is there a set of things that someone could check for to make sure they're getting CMMC compliant backups?
Is that a question to me or Damien or all of us?
To Damien, Tim, mainly to Damien. Damien, what do you think?
It's funny you pick CMMC. I love to see Tim's reaction when you do that. That's the best
gets
part.
Excited.
About CMMC. It's one of those, like, I talk to everybody and it's like, oh, which one? It's a moving target,
Right.
Which level, and that, like, if I'll get calls all the time. I need CMMC backups. What does that mean? And
right.
Like, I don't know. You tell me. CMC which one? I don't, which, what level? I don't know. Just give me those. So that's what I would throw back to the Tims, to anybody who wants to comment. It's like, what does that really mean?
All right, I gotta put my CMMC hat on here.
There you go.
Let's just do this, because this is how the industry is right now. By the way, did you see the whole reciprocity thing that just came out from the White House on framework reciprocity and open for comment? So yeah, it's a crap show. But let's just talk about basic backup stuff, right? You mentioned earlier about data encryption at rest, data in transit encrypted, like all of that stuff, right? Most likely they're probably and I don't know enough about your product yet, but like FIPS, oh, okay, like that's great for the first 30 seconds, and then something changes and it's no longer compliant, right? So that's like the whole FIPS is a ball of wax, right? Let's just take it from a defensibility standpoint, right? You have a DR plan, disaster recovery plan, or you have a business continuity or a backup or some documentation that defines what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what that looks like, right? So as we're trying to build our defenses in the framework to an auditor, right? Because CMMC, third-party assessor, we need to be able to prove to an auditor that we're in line with the guidance and we're doing what the guidance has to say, right? So obviously starting with whatever framework and looking through the framework and the controls that talk about disaster recovery, business continuity, backups, and understanding those controls, and then writing your policies and procedures and everything and the tools to do all of that. Like our DR plan, like making sure that we're doing a bare metal recovery on an interval, making sure that we're reviewing to ensure that the backups are being completed on the interval. So it didn't run last night. Okay, what happened? Having that policy, having that procedure and that plan in place, I don't care what framework, like starting with understanding what the requirements are and making sure that you're doing everything that you possibly can to adhere to those requirements. What does that specifically mean for CMMC? We don't have enough time in the last half hour left.
Yeah, well said, Tim. Yeah, and I think it's like you said, there's a third-party assessor. There's just all these things. There's testing that needs to be done. What does testing mean? What testing is acceptable? It seems like some of that is, from my perspective, a little vague in interpretation. So, of course, you could interpret as the minimal. Perhaps you want to do more, especially if you can get charged to do more. But that's the other question. So I think, that's the question. And what I always kind of reflect back is like, what are you trying to achieve? And, unfortunately, the answer is unclear, I think. And because it's so unclear, most of the industry is, not ready for it. Not only the MSPs, I just mean also us as vendors. If I want to call myself a vendor, I'd like to think more of a partner that actually understands and tries to work with you. But if I think about us generically, all of the folks on the other side of the MSP table, what do we need to do? It's a moving target, because like you said, Tim, there's a FIPS endpoint, which basically describes an encryption standard in which you must use. By the way, it's a dated one that's worse than modern ones, but like all documentation, it's a thing. And so, sure, you could use that, but that in itself doesn't do it. It used to be that maybe that and some, just your own assessments would be enough for other compliance. But as Tim said, it introduces testing, which is, to me, the only way, if you have good backups, but there's also a lot of room for interpretation around what testing. And can you really prove that? So that's a lot of the calls I get is like, how do I even prove it? Or how do I even build the process to keep up with this, especially when it's more than one device or more than one client?
Yeah. And the proof,
like Tim, like in terms of controls, right, and policies and governance, like how much is it on the IT provider and how much is it on the vendor? And I'm thinking controls, I'm like data destruction, right, like encryption at rest, access controls, right, like you just kind of like start to check through the list on least trust, right, and how much of it, like, I'm assuming there's a bare minimum like threshold for the vendor, like Damien has to provide, but also like it sounds like a lot of it's on the IT provider, right? Like they've got to have their shop in order in terms of all those like general hygiene things. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you bring up a couple of good points, right? And so, how much is this on the vendor? How much is this on the MSP IT provider, right? And this is where, like, when I'm doing vendor due diligence and I'm looking at a vendor, let's say in this case, backup, and I already know what my requirements are. I need to be able to like hit these things, do these things. These 6 things are non-negotiable, right? And so when I'm doing that vendor due diligence and I'm looking at a backup vendor, I'm already going to them with some knowledge because I've researched their website and looked at their stuff and their features and done my diligence. I'm already approaching that vendor with, here's what I've understood from your platform. Can you confirm? Here's what I haven't had answered yet. How are you addressing them? Coming into the middle of that and then working through that shared responsibility of, all right, you are responsible for X. I've got that. Then in my program for my clients as an MSP, I'm going to be responsible for Y, and the client is going to be responsible for Z. Across all 3 that areas of the supply chain of the vendor, the MSP, and the client, documented with processes, SLAs, and all that stuff around it, right? And so, CMMC, HIPAA, whatever it is, I know I'm gonna. Are they encrypted? What's the recovery time, right? How is this configuration monitored? Right? Not even just are the backups being done, but I'm going to set up these backups. I'm going to set this schedule, do this stuff. Who monitors the change management of that? Right? Like, can my tech just go in and accidentally click a button and no one knows about it and now they just stop working? Right? So those are some of the things that I would be like looking at when a vendor is. What kind of schedules can I create? Where is the data stored? Who has access to the data? All that fun stuff, right? Those are the kinds of things that I would start to ask in a vendor conversation around backup.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, really, and I guess we could boil this down to make it more broad, but I'm going to speak from CMMC, is use the NIST 800-171. Any control that refers to backups, you need to handle. You need to make sure you have policies and you're executing those procedures to the policies. And then as far as tooling is concerned, your standard image-based backups using a FIPS compliant algorithm and stored within the US, correct?
Well, I mean, yes, correct. The US is definitely helpful, especially with ITAR and EAR.
Yeah. I'm more familiar with ITAR, I should say that. Yeah.
ITAR, EAR, and all those other funny acronyms that we love to talk about in the CMMC space. But yeah, and let's take it a step further. Like, where is the vendor staff located? Where is their development? Is that offshore, onshore, right? We're seeing a lot in our federal space. We're not allowed to use offshore development anymore, period. It all has to be US based, background check, fingerprinted, blood drawn, and so Damien, I don't know, again, nothing about your stuff, your SDLC or any of that kind of thing, but like, if I'm going to do work in the CMMC space, which means my clients need to adhere to the federal regulations that exist and ones that will be coming. We hear about supply chain all the time. I'm going to want to know, are your developers based in, I don't know, Russia? That's probably a problem, right? Right? Are you outsourcing, Damien, not to say you, I'm just kind of saying this broadly, like, is your software development team based in China? Like, that's could be a problem, right?
Right.
So, it isn't just, am I doing a backup on a schedule? Like the diligence part tends to get way down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are good points. And I feel like I don't get asked those. Those are the ones I probably should be getting asked and I can answer. But I get a lot more of like, I need ITAR or EAR or, something, the acronyms, because those are, I think, and again, I don't usually, sometimes I get something more specific like 800-171 or 853, but usually it's just like CMMC.
Yeah.
What, where do you need, what are you looking for? And so I think just trying to understand, right. My 2 cents is try to understand where it applies, what's in scope, all the sort of things, because you may be asking for something that doesn't exist. You're asking for a unicorn in terms of a provider, and or even if it does, you might be paying too much. And as much as I would be happy to charge you, I don't want to charge you a penny more than what you absolutely need. It's got to be right size, right fit. And then lastly, you kind of mentioned, where is it? Where's the data stored? Obviously, US, like you said, staffing, right? I think the reason we get a lot of the calls is we do the testing for you. So that's kind of where we come into the picture. It's unusual is we do all of the testing and it's built in, and we do it daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. So there's a built-in schedule, non-optional. And so because we do that, no matter whether you're compliant, whether you're in the scope of compliance or not, we probably get more than the average ones of like, well, because you do the testing, can you just magically solve my CMMC riddle for me? And, that's not quite how it works.
Well, therein lies the problem, right? Is MSPs are busy. We talk about this all the time, right, Tim, with Jesse? They're busy. They don't want to be bothered. They want the check box. Can you just check this box for me? Because there's got to be some Swiss Army knife that can check the box for me, right? Mm-hmm. And this is why we do Team Tim, right? Because that mentality has to change, not just from a compliance perspective, but from an overall business perspective as an MSP. Like, yeah, the more we can check boxes, the more efficient we might be able to become, but we lose sight of the why, right? Not just the how, but the why behind this, right? And it becomes a big challenge, right? We talk about this all the time, right, Tim, right, Jesse?
Yep. I'm just thinking, and I you can throw something at me if you want to, but I'm thinking I know we stay away from vendors, but just as we think through this, it feels like we have everything we need to on the show right now to get you CMMC compliant backups. You go with compliance risk and Polygon for your process. You go with Damien for your technology, and you just actually have to bring some people and do a few things and make sure you're actually executing against those.
Wait, we're even going to back up. All right, I'm just going to do it since you went there. I'm just going to do it, right? So CMMC, it's all about the data, right? So we need to start with our friend Tim up in the corner. Like, what the hell do you have, and where is it? Thank you, Cavello. And then wait, maybe even just back that up. Like, I need a process to help me define. Oh, wait, a data flow diagram. Oh, so Cavello's going to help us find the data. Polygon and compliance risk is going to help us organize, structure, prioritize, and we're going to use Jesse to manage this whole thing, right? Because, he's got the management skills as an MSP. And then Damien's just going to back it up and make sure it's protected. So we're done here. CMMC, check in a box.
You heard it here first, folks. CMMC solved. Kidding.
We just broke all the rules there. We just went
That's
gross
right.
on this. But, you know,
Literally, I told you, Damien, we go off the rails pretty quick.
but no, I want to say though, you know, all joking aside, now you kind of get a good picture for what a program should look like, whoever and whatever you use to actually provide a CMMC compliant backup solution to your clients. And that's what I want people to take away here.
Yeah, and it's not cheap either. Right? Yeah. It's not like there's you get to justify this price by having that long. Jesse's going to have all these long conversations.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, it is labor intensive. You're going to have to dedicate some people to do this. And so that's also something to consider is if you want to go down the CMMC road, just be prepared that you really have to commit and do it. It's not because one client asked you for it. You know, that's when you partner with people for enclaves and things like that. So
yeah.
And consider that.
This is the question I answer all the time with MSPs is I'll get an email, I'll get on a call with an MSP and they will have, they'll be like, oh my God, I got to do CMMC. And the first question is this a current client or is this a prospect?
Right.
And they're like, well, I want to do the work because there's millions. I'm like, do you have a current client or a prospect?
Right.
And if they can answer that question one way or the other, I'm going to tailor the conversation. Like, well, I have, a friend of a next door neighbor's third cousin twice removed that has a small manufacturing company that I visited, on days ending in F.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a prospect.
Yeah.
Now, think of this. And I was just explaining this to one of our contract officers. Like, if you're going to go down some kind of regulatory body, some kind of federal government thing, you want to make sure that you're budgeting 15 to 20% of your revenue to deal with this.
Right.
So, 20% of $1 million is 200 grand. If my math is right,
That's
you better
right.
have
Your math is right, Tim. That's good.
You better have a bucket of 200 grand sitting on the side, average, right? So, I just talked to an OSC the other day, right? Father and son, machinist company, great company, looking to do all this stuff, right? And, wanting to do the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wanting to have backups, not for cyber insurance, but also CMMC, right? Wanting to do the right things and educating them as we should. And, one of the questions I asked was like, have you made a budget for this? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. We kind of looked at everything and we're like, we think that we spent a lot of time understanding. And we're like, we budgeted $10,000 for our CMMC program. It's like, okay, so your entire
it's not for sale. Yeah, it's not for sale, right?
Yeah, your entire CMMC program, everything that you might need to do with 2 buildings, 60 some odd staff, 100%, 60 grand, like 50, 60 grand. No. And so the conversation needed to shift. And Tim, this is where you and I always get into, like, as MSPs, how do we sell this, right? How do we help MSPs not only make money at it, but be efficient at it, and their clients don't, sell the farm, like lose the business because of it, right? And I've got some thoughts on that, but maybe Tim, you wanted to kind of share, like, how do we deal with selling backup? How do we deal with all this kind of stuff?
It's a different conversation, right? Because it's like if this show is dedicated towards enterprise InfoSec, right, information security, like it's a different conversation where they may or may not be empowered by like the C-suite. They may or may not have budget, right? But even then, like everything they do in enterprise is different than the MSP, right? Like has a mindset of like, I have to make margin here. I have to be efficient. I have, a lot of things Jesse talks about, all these lessons or approaches or tips or, this book of knowledge on how to actually deliver this stuff at a profit and be, effective at it. So they're just totally different, right? And this is a great point, Tim, in terms of CMMC or FedRAMP or NIST, right? NIST compliance, like they're going to have a very different mindset. Even you like almost acting half as an IT person, half as a lawyer, right? Like, I'm going to cover my you know what, and they're like, oh, people are going to do this, and if they don't do it, like, they're going to get in trouble and whatever. And then the MSP has to come in there and basically deliver that same level of security culture, and it's just not that easy, right? So they're definitely not empowered from the start. They're not resourced from the start from a dollar budget perspective. They actually have to sell the customer on why they need to spend this, and then why they need to commit the time and hours and build a culture. So it's just it's a very different approach, and it's hard, right? And we've got people on every week that trying to spill their secret sauce. So it's good. Like Damien.
Yeah. I think the takeaway or what I would caution MSPs is, like you said, the shiny object syndrome. Oh, we have this hot prospect. There's potential we see for, like Tim said, $100,000 in revenue to get them CMMC compliant. But what is the operational and technical cost of taking your eye off the ball for your core business to do that? So, I mean, it's really $100,000 wash by the time everything's said and done, and then all the ancillary problems that it brings with it and liability that it brings with it as well. So I don't want to discourage people from doing that, but I think that it should not be a reactive thing. It should be a proactive thing. Maybe that's, you take that opportunity, table it, pass it to a partner, and then take a sober and steady look saying, should we go after this practice? Should we develop an ICP and a practice for this, and realize that we are going to have some significant outlay in terms of spend to get the program off the ground, but we're going to focus and do it the right way and cover ourselves. And so I think that's the better approach to take. And I, again, don't want to discourage anybody from that, but I think that's the way to think about it as you get started.
Yeah. And I want to kind of mention the psychological aspect. And what I mean is, I feel like that whenever there's a lot of uncertainty, sometimes you get the people that are like, that's the time to make money. I can charge 10x. Raking over the coals.
Hey, pause you right there. So web hosting in the late 90s, right? Oh my gosh, did we make so much money on web hosting back in the day? Like, people didn't know, they didn't realize. And 56K modem, like, we were charging literally thousands of dollars a month per client for hosting. Yeah, not my best. Like, I should probably unbrand myself. Wasn't my business decision. I just worked there, right? But it was. Crazy.
Well, that's my point. We will have some of those that just look at this and go, "Wow, open space equals open opportunity to get open unlimited check or infinite check size." But I think my experience with MSPs is actually almost all fall in the other category. And my point is, this is the opportunity that we all need to come together on, because the other is psychologically, like, just a whole lot of uncertainty. It feels like a great way to walk into a lawsuit, or even if I don't fear that, I fear learning all this. It's a moving target. I don't, you talked about the budget it takes. Can I sell it? It feels like an uphill battle. Am I, do I have, like we all have, right, in this day and age, staffing is not easy to come by. Can I actually do this? Right. And my point in saying this, I think you just want to acknowledge, like, there's some whenever there's so much uncertainty, there's a lot of fear. And if you're that person, let us know. But then also, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I don't think we should leave this to the 1% or 0.5%. I think there's going to have to be a lot more MSPs involved. Do you need to be involved? I can't answer that question. Should every MSP be involved? Certainly not. Right. But should we only leave it to the 1% of the market in terms of MSPs?
No, and I agree with you. That's having qualified partners, because I mean, if you're involved in kind of just the chatter in CMMC land, as I like to put it all, just the need for qualified partners, and how many companies need to be compliant and haven't really even thought through it at a budgeting level yet, it's staggering. However, it needs to be a reasoned and a measured and a steady approach to it, I guess, was what I was trying to say about that.
Yeah. So I have so many thoughts. So trying to kind of stay down in there, right? So,
Charles,
that easy. Exactly, Charles. Right. So how do we sell backup? Right. I'm just going to get us back on topic, back on track. Right. We do know cyber liability is asking. Right. So let's noodle on that for a minute, because not everybody's going to deal with CMMC. Right. Let's noodle on the cyber liability part. Right. So, Damien, I'm sure you're seeing questions, comments, and thoughts from your partners and prospects around cyber liability. Is that correct?
Yeah, the two more common ones are the two things that are catching MSPs off guard. The less common is it stored in some way immutably? And I think, insurance companies, they don't know exactly how you're going to run IT, but their risk, they're trying to reduce their risk. And the other one that's really catching more MSPs off guard is, have you done not only a test, but have you done an offsite test? And, hopefully it's more MSPs than clients listening, but most MSPs go, I got 2 clients I test for. I do it annually and I charge them extra. What about the others? No, never. And so it's a tough spot to be caught in, because you don't have the personnel. In most cases, I didn't have the process to do that at scale. And so this is my thing. It comes back to people and process. If you have the right people and process, you could pull off anything.
And the reality is you don't need a hell of a lot of people if you know what the process is, right? If I told you how many people work at my MSP, you might think that I'm, a multi-billion or 100. Like, no, we're not. We're not hundreds of staff, right? But we're doing the work. We're making it profitable. We're meeting the mark when it comes to our federal requirements, and we're not doing it with a shit ton of staff. Now, are we doing everything perfect? No, we're doing everything as perfectly as we can, but we have that documented, repeatable process that can help us scale, right?
Repeatable is the main thing there, right? You don't want a process that only works when everything's going well.
And all of our staff know what the process is, right? I'll back up, like as again, I was going to say, cleaning out this morning, I pulled out a box of documents, and right on there, 2006 disaster recovery and backup plan. I wish I could take it from my phone and share it, because I took a picture. But 2006 backup into DR plan, and I'm kind of thumbing through it, and I'm like, wow, like we were like doing this stuff, like, full nightly backups to tape, like with the process of the clerical staff, our like rock stars, walking down every morning, grabbing the tape, swapping the tape, adjusting the tape log, taking the tape, putting it in the fireproof safe in a different building. Like we had, and we didn't do that all with the IT staff. We used the rest of the company as part of the plan, right? As part of the stuff. Jesse, I see you smirking over there. What are you smirking for?
I'm just laughing because I'm like, I remember my dad doing that, taking it in his briefcase every day home and taking the weekly backups home. And so I come from a long stock of IT engineers, and I just remember that. So it's a good.
Yeah, and we had. I mean, the word secretary is the wrong word, but it's what's rolling off my tongue. Like we had the secretaries doing that.
Yeah.
Like their job was to, when they first came in the morning, besides, making coffee, like go to the server room, get the tape. There would be an email sitting in their box with pass fail. If it failed, they would contact IT. Mm-hmm. They would get the tape. They would write on the little log that they did it. They would bring it in. So it was kind of funny because we had to do a few things differently for our Florida office, like explicitly write, do not leave the tape in your hot car.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, the funny thing about that is, in some ways we've improved over the years, and in some ways we have not. So thanks for the dropping the link to Servosity there. And so what I mean by that is, like, it's easier to test maybe because it was really hard to put, tape A, B, C, D, E and get them in the right order and do all the testing with tape backup. And so hopefully testing is in that way better. One thing I want to say on testing before we move on is I talk to too many MSPs and say, do you test? And they say, absolutely. I get a screenshot emailed to me. It booted up the VM and sent a screenshot over. Well, every vendor does that now. It's table stakes. That is not enough. There's a whole lot of reasons. The simplest one to understand is that does not do anything for your data volumes, which is probably where your irreplaceable data is.
Right.
So in one way, we have these vast improvements like automated that, but we also have a false sense of security around what are we really testing.
Yeah.
The other irony, just to flip the other side of the coin, is if your backups aren't immutable, then the tape could have been more resilient or robust than where we are today because it's all online. So if you don't have something like that, then you're just one credential compromise away from every. And the other thing some people don't quite understand is we've always had versions, a year's worth of versions or whatever it is. That's for as long as
6 weeks, 6
30
weeks,
30 days, 6 weeks, whatever it is. But what people don't get in any modern system is they're all stored on the same equivalent of a server. And so if the bad guy gets in or you get compromised, all 6 weeks or all year's worth or whatever it is, are all compromised. And that's where we were kind of better back in the tape days because there was a fireproof safe and it was offline.
Air gap.
We actually we account for that, right? So now in our current backup strategy, right? So we volume shadow copy, blah 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 blah. But we utilize Azure Backup as the first phase of backup. So we'll even back up. Yes, we do have an on-prem file server. Yes, we're using volume shadow copy, making copies of that data as it changes in real time. Have that scheduled on the box itself, on the drive itself, so we can recover a file in an 8-hour period because staff delete stuff too frequently.
Right.
We have that first layer. The second layer is Azure Backup, right? The third layer is our backup vendor. So we have separate, backups. We have 2 layers of backup, actually 3 layers of backup for that stuff. And they don't talk to each other. So it's the equivalent of taking the tape out of the building to some other, location. We do that. And, our Northeast backs up to the West Coast and vice versa, right? So there isn't even a physical geographic issue with how we're doing backups.
One last thing on that is I think SSO is great. It's great for auditing, it's great for logs, but we get a whole lot of we want to SSO everything, including backup. And my argument is you probably don't, because if I get Tim's credentials, I shouldn't be able to log into, using your example, Azure and the backup vendor using your credentials, or then it does not matter which coast they're on and that they're on 2 coasts. So just some thought like that of no matter how much convenience we want, just one little piece of thought in your process could make the difference.
You want it to be inconvenient, basically, Damien, right? You're saying. You want it to be, you want it to be a one-way, a drop safe, right? Like you've seen those things in the gas station when the money drops in, right?
That's right.
Some other guy's got to know the code.
There's a lot to it. It's got to be convenient enough.
He's the only guy that can access it.
It's got to be convenient enough for you to do it. If it's too inconvenient, right? We all know that about security. If it's too inconvenient, you won't do it. But if we don't ever test, and if we don't ever have enough safeguards, like Tim was doing, like having 2 or essentially 3 places means that the odds of him having to pay a ransom, should he, in the hopefully unlikely event, get encrypted, are a lot lower, because now they've got to destroy the volume shadow copies. Now they've got to get the access. Maybe whatever tool uploads to Azure, they reverse engineer it and they do get access to the Azure bucket credentials, wipe it out. Wonderful. They don't have access to the backup vendor, right? Maybe the reverse order. That's the kind of thing you should think about. Do you need 3 vendors? No, not necessarily, but there's just a few common things you can think through of, and they don't have to all cost you money. You don't have to triple your costs, is what I'm saying. You don't, for example, you don't need Azure, Google, and Amazon copies of your data to just get, what you have, which is basically kind of 3 different ways of approaching the problem.
Right. It's again, as we always say, it boils down to people and process, and you can do it cost effectively and build that that word.
Immutable. Yeah.
That. So, we're kind of wrapping up. We're coming at the top of the hour, 4 or 5 minutes left here. Damien, I want to kind of give you a 30-second, 1 minute, like wrap up opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about y'all. Any final thoughts? So why don't you go ahead and give us 30 seconds or so?
Yeah. So remember, my story is I was an MSP that lost data. My mission is to make sure that is not you. If you want to have a call with me to pick my brain on the people and process, what the heck I would do that. If you want to hire us to take care of all the testing and all of the immutable storage, wonderful. And lastly, I give away the process we use. And the spoiler alert is you can use any vendor because it's about the people and the process. So you can take the process that we've battle hardened over the last 18 years and use it with any vendor. So I don't care if you take the whole process or a piece out of it, just don't have to stand in front of your customer like I did and say, I've failed to deliver what I thought I was going to do. And I can't help you recover, because there's just no worse place to be than that.
So thank you so much for that 30-second, 3-hour explanation.
I can go on.
Kind of funny. I've been doing these pitch it things. You guys have been seeing me do these pitch it things. And the other day I was on one and they were like, 30-second pitch and we're going to cut you off. And I was like, 15 seconds. And I was like, then I froze and I was like, what do I say next? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like a 10 seconds. And it was like, I got what I wanted to say out in like 15 seconds. And they're like, you didn't use the whole, like the feedback, you didn't use the whole time. Then, conversely, there have been other people where they ramble on for 7 or 8 or 9 minutes and they get the gong, right? So yeah. Hey, Jesse, final thoughts, parting words around backup and fun things here.
All right. Don't gong me if I go over 30 seconds.
No.
Yeah, I think backups are an important conversation that we sometimes take for granted. But again, reiterating the sentiment is that you don't have to break the bank to do backups right, but you do have to have a good process and you do have to have people that can execute on it. And so whatever that is, make sure that you have that in place, you're testing it, and have some sort of script to actually test against your data and databases rather than just a screenshot of your server.
Good stuff. Thanks for that. And Mr. Tim, last but not least, I'm trying to get your link up here as well. So final thoughts, Tim.
Yeah, no, I think backup's something I always took for granted. And I think a lot of small businesses probably do as well, right? They think that they're on Office 365 or, Google and like everything's just okay. And, they don't hear horror stories. Like they just think, oh, I'm on the cloud and everything's okay. So I learned a lot. It's not something I usually focus on in terms of backups and a lot of best practices. As Damien said here, it's really about, people controls, right? And some of the tough lessons I'm sure he learned and what didn't work over the years. So appreciate, Damien coming on and spreading his knowledge in this particular niche. So
nice. And I'm going to yield
Tim next week. You got that one as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to yield my time here for a second to a comment that just came in from Kenneth. So use case, single creds, access other than convenience, right? Does anybody want to take this real quick or no?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple different ways I could read that, but you don't need a million different credentials, right? There's kind of 2 ways I would look at this. Locally, what I mean is the credential, if the compromiser can compromise that machine, and just assume they will, if you're backing up even locally to another device, whether vendor device, NAS, whatever that is, those should not be domain joined. They should not be the same credentials. If it's domain joined, then once I get that, I'm going to move laterally, everything's destroyed. So forget what's might be safe offsite in the cloud or wherever. You want to defend what you can locally. So just make sure lateral movement is just defended in those ways. And then lastly, like Tim is doing, you probably don't want to have a single credential or single sign-on for your RMM and your backup vendor, because if the RMM vendor is the source of the attack, then they're into your backups. They're deleting those. So, or if they just impersonate you, because look, as the owner, CEO, or founder, whatever, you don't want to think you're above being compromised, and you don't want your credentials to be the thing that could bring everybody down. So just as something as simple as a different password for just one system could make all the difference in the world.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So next week, we're going to have our friend next week, Team Tim Live. Head over to teamtim.live. You can see what we have coming up. Next week, we have our friend Matt Solomon talking about, testimonials, social proof, ways for you to be able to delineate your NSP from others in the community, right? And so we're pretty excited to bring Matt, over at Channel Program. If you're not familiar with Channel Program, head on over to channelprogram.com, take a look. They are an MSP specific organization for building out reviews and profiles and pitches for MSP.
They're the G2 of MSP.
Yes.
MSP.
Yeah,
vendors, right.
I was just about to say they are the G2 of MSP vendors, right? And so we're pretty excited to get Matt on. Matt knows the value of dealing with, reviews and how that can help your MSP and differentiate you. So yeah, join us next week at what is it? 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Damn, sorry. It's been a rough day. Like moving all this crap in the office, like kicking my butt. So while we're at it, I'm going to throw this up here one more time. If I can scroll, gonna do this, right? Head on over to Team Tim Live on our LinkedIn page. Give us the follow so we can start streaming it over there, please. Begging, please. anyways, this is ends this week edition. Paulie says goodbye. Have a good week. And we'll hopefully see some of you all at ChannelCon in 2 weeks.
Cool. Later, everyone.
One last wrap. Damien, 2 seconds, final words.
Yeah, 2 seconds. Thank you. This has been amazing. There you go.
You hit your pitch. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Hang out here in the green room, and we'll see you soon. Do I have an ending?
Thanks, guys.
Video.
Thanks for having me.
I don't have an ending video. All right. 3, 2, 1. Bye.